The seat ticket felt too light to be dangerous. It was only a rectangle of cream card, printed with the Academy crest, my candidate number, and one neat black line that said Seat B14. In my first life, I had guarded that ticket like a sacred object. I had slipped it into a clear folder, checked it before breakfast, checked it again in the bus, and pressed it flat beneath my palm until the edges dug crescent marks into my skin. I thought a seat number was a promise. A desk. A place. A fair chance. I was wrong. A seat number could be bait. A seat number could be a knife with the handle wrapped in silk. A seat number could be the exact spot where a girl like me was supposed to sit still while someone else's fraud became my fate. When I opened my eyes again, the ticket was already in my hand, and the morning smelled of burnt toast, wet pavement, and the cheap jasmine spray my aunt used whenever she wanted the apartment to seem kinder than it was. I did not gasp. I did not cry. I did not fling the ticket across the room. I just stared at B14 until the numbers stopped trembling because I remembered that desk. I remembered the wobbling left leg, the scratch shaped like a hook beside the answer booklet slot, and the folded paper tucked under the underside of the desk where I could not see it until the proctor dragged it out in front of 200 candidates. I remember the star pupil, Celine Voss, turning around with those wide innocent eyes as if she had not been the one who told me the night before that B14 was lucky. I remember the head examiner holding up the cheat sheet and saying my name, not hers. I remembered being escorted out before question 7. I remembered my results being voided, my scholarship disappearing, my family calling me shameless, and Celine walking across the prize stage 2 months later, wearing a white ribbon in her hair and my future under her shoes. So when my aunt shouted from the kitchen that I would be late, I folded the ticket once and put it under the heel of my shoe. Not because I wanted to destroy it, because I needed to feel it. I needed the tiny ridge beneath my foot to remind me that this time, I was not walking into a trap by accident. This time, I was bringing the trap with me, turning it slowly in my hands, learning where the hinges opened. My cousin Nessa burst into my room without knocking, as always, holding her own ticket like a trophy. "Still getting ready?" she asked, her voice bright with the kind of fake concern that always came wrapped around a blade. "Celine says everyone assigned to row B should arrive together. She knows the staff. She says there are inspection delays." In my first life, I had thanked her. I had hurried. I had let Celine organize me, calm me, position me, and point me toward the exact desk where the planted cheat sheet waited. In this life, I picked up my hairbrush and smiled at the mirror. "Tell Celine I'll meet her there." Nessa blinked because I had not sounded frightened. In our house, fear had always been my assigned language. I was the girl who apologized when someone stepped on my foot, the girl who said thank you when teachers took credit for my work, the girl who made study schedules for everyone else, and then stayed awake alone to repair the parts they ruined. Celine understood that better than anyone. She had built her whole halo from pieces of other girls' obedience, and mine had been the easiest to cut. She did not need to be the smartest student at Ashevale Preparatory Institute. She only needed everyone to believe she was. That belief did most of the work for her. It opened doors, softened teachers, silenced doubts, and made every accusation against her sound like jealousy. In my first life, when I insisted the cheat sheet was not mine, the deputy examiner looked at Celine's perfect record, then at my cheap shoes, and chose the story that looked prettier on paper. I left the apartment 11 minutes after Nessa, not with row B, not with Celine's little group, and not with the nervous stream of candidates who believed arriving together meant surviving together. I walked 2 streets in the opposite direction first, under shop awnings still dripping from the night rain, until I reached a copy store with metal shutters half open and a man inside drinking tea from a chipped mug. In my first life, I had never noticed the copy store. I had never needed it. This time, I stepped inside and asked for a plain envelope, a black marker, and 1 sheet of carbonless receipt paper. The man barely looked at me. He tore the receipt paper from an old invoice pad, gave me the envelope, and watched me write my own name across it in block letters. Inside, I placed my B14 ticket, the one with my candidate number, and the printed seat I had once died under. Then I wrote 1 sentence on the outside, for verification if candidate requests official seat confirmation. I sealed it, paid in coins, and slid it into the inner pocket of my blazer. That envelope mattered because Asheville's examination center had one weakness no student ever cared about: administrative pride. The exam board did not trust students, but it trusted its own paper trail more than breathing. Every change, every incident, every complaint, every swapped desk, every broken chair, every misprinted ticket had to be logged twice, stamped once, and signed by someone who wanted their handwriting to survive an audit. In my first life, I learned that too late, months after the scandal, when a retired clerk from the center whispered to me that desk B14 had been flagged before the exam began. Not for cheating, for a damaged seal. The paper set assigned to that seat had been removed from the valid distribution list because the packet arrived with one corner torn. But someone somehow placed a booklet there anyway. When I sat at B14, the system marked my paper as irregular. The planted cheat sheet only made the accusation easier. My entire answer booklet was void before I touched the first page, and nobody told me because telling me would have meant admitting the center's chain of custody had broken. The first pattern interruption came outside the academy gates, where Celine Voss stood beneath a red umbrella she did not need, surrounded by students who looked at her the way villagers look at a lighthouse during a storm. She wore the white ribbon already, tied so neatly against her dark hair that every loose strand around the rest of us looked like proof of moral failure. Her mother had sent pastries to the teacher's lounge for 3 years. Her father funded the new debate hall. Her name had been printed in the student bulletin so often that younger students thought Celine Voss was a title, not a person. She smiled when she saw me, and the old part of me flinched before the new part stepped on it. "Mara," she called, sweet enough to rot fruit. "We waited for you. We should go together." I looked past her at the girls clustered behind the umbrella, including Nessa, who was pretending not to be desperate for Celine's approval. "That's kind," I said, "but I need to check something at the registration booth." Celine's smile stayed perfect, but her fingers tightened around the umbrella handle. She had expected nerves, gratitude, maybe a little panic she could herd into place. She had not expected me to make a separate administrative choice. "Registration is only for missing tickets," she said. "You have yours, don't you?" There it was, the soft probe. Did I still have the bait? Had I looked under the hook? I tapped my blazer pocket. Of course. Then I tilted my head and gave her the exact helpless smile she had once taught me to wear. But my seat number looks smudged. I want them to confirm it before the exam. For half a second, Celine forgot to be gentle. Her eyes moved to my pocket. In that instant, I knew she already knew B14. She knew it because she had arranged it, or because someone had told her where the irregular desk would be, or because in every life there are people who can smell a weak system from across a room and call it opportunity. Then the mask returned. "Don't worry," she said, stepping closer. "I can help. My uncle knows the deputy supervisor. Let me see your ticket." In my first life, I would have handed it over. It would have felt rude not to. In this life, I reached into my pocket, but instead of pulling out the ticket, I pulled out a folded timetable from last semester and let it flutter to the ground. Everyone watched me bend to pick it up. Everyone, except Celine, whose gaze shot toward my blazer again like a needle finding cloth. "Maybe later," I said. "I don't want to hold everyone up." The registration booth was set up under a temporary white tent beside the east entrance. Candidates lined up in nervous clumps, whispering formulas, legal principles, history dates, whatever they thought might keep their minds from cracking open. I joined the shortest queue and waited while a clerk with purple glasses scanned tickets against a printed master list. Behind me, Celine's group hovered just far enough away to pretend they were not watching. I could feel her anger disguised as patience. She needed me at B14. She needed my name attached to the damaged packet. She needed my body in that chair when the proctor reached under the desk and found the cheat sheet. If I simply refused, she would adjust. She was too quick not to. So I could not just escape the seat. I had to make her want it. When I reached the clerk, I handed over the envelope instead of the ticket. "I'm sorry," I said, loudly enough for the line behind me to hear. "My printed seat may be wrong. Could you verify whether B14 is still active?" The clerk frowned because students did not usually ask questions like that. They asked where the bathroom was, whether clear pencil cases were allowed, whether water labels needed removal. They did not ask whether a seat was active. She opened the envelope, scanned the ticket, and then her frown deepened. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "It was delivered to our apartment with the other candidate papers." That was true. The best lies are often facts placed under the wrong light. She looked down at her master list, then at a smaller red folder beside her scanner, then called for a supervisor. Behind me, whispers spread like ink in water. Celine stepped closer. The supervisor was a square-faced woman named Mrs. Albright, and I remembered her from my first life as the person who would not meet my eyes while security escorted me out. Today she wore the same navy suit, the same pearl earrings, the same expression of someone allergic to inconvenience. "Candidate Vale?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She compared the ticket to the red folder and lowered her voice. "B14 was removed from standard seating this morning due to packet irregularity. You should have received an updated slip at intake." My pulse kicked hard once, but I kept my face blank. Packet irregularity. There it was, spoken before witnesses, before the exam, before Celine could wrap the truth in accusation. I pressed my hands together, as if anxious. "I didn't receive one. Does that mean I can't sit?" "No," she said quickly, because administrative pride hates sounding cruel. "We'll reassign you. Temporary seat D27. I'll mark the correction." That was when Celine arrived at my shoulder with perfect timing and terrible hunger. "Is something wrong with Mara's seat?" she asked, not to help me, but to collect the shape of the obstacle. Mrs. Albright glanced at her and recognized the ribbon, the name, the donor family, the kind of student adults forgive before she speaks. "Nothing that concerns other candidates." Celine's smile turned softer. "Of course. We're just nervous. Mara and I studied together." Another lie so small nobody would challenge it. We had not studied together in months. She had asked for my notes, praised my diagrams, borrowed my practice essays, and never once sat beside me long enough to learn how I thought. But the crowd heard studied together and filed us into the same moral box. Good girls. Serious girls. Safe girls. That was how Celine operated. She made proximity look like endorsement. Mrs. Albright wrote D27 on a yellow correction slip and slid it toward me. I took it, but slowly, letting the new number show. Celine saw it. More importantly, she saw that my old ticket, B14, remained on the table for 1 second too long. Her eyes flickered. The calculation happened behind them. B14 had been removed, which meant it was special. B14 had an irregular packet, which meant a system error. B14 was dangerous for me, but perhaps useful for her. She did not know the old paper was voided. She thought a removed seat might contain a fresh booklet without proper tracking, a chance to switch, a place where a planted note could still do its job if attached to the right victim. Or maybe she simply could not bear that I had been moved away from the trap she prepared. Either way, greed entered the room wearing perfume. I folded the yellow slip and stepped aside. Nessa grabbed my sleeve the moment we were clear of the booth. "What happened?" she whispered. "You got D27? That's near the back." Celine said front rows get collected first. Better for ranking. I looked at my cousin, at the fear beneath her annoyance, and felt the old ache trying to open. Nessa had not been born cruel. She had learned cruelty was a currency accepted in our house. She paid with it whenever she wanted protection. In my first life, she repeated Celine's rumors because it was easier than standing near me while I burned. I did not hate her anymore. Hate keeps people too close. "Then maybe Celine should take B14, I said lightly. "If she thinks it matters." Nessa's eyes widened. She looked over her shoulder, and I knew the line had landed exactly where it needed to. The trade itself happened 15 minutes later in the corridor outside Hall 2, with dozens of witnesses and not one person understanding what they were seeing. Celine approached holding her own ticket, A06, a prestigious front block seat with a clean packet and a valid chain. "Mara," she said, lowering her voice as if offering mercy. "You look upset about being moved to the back. I know how much this exam means to you." I almost laughed. In my first life, Those exact words came after my disqualification, when she visited my apartment with a fruit basket and told my aunt she hoped I would heal from the consequences of my choices. Now she held out A06 like a queen granting land. If you want, I can ask the supervisor whether we can trade. It might calm you down. The girls around us sighed at her generosity. Nessa's mouth fell open with admiration. You do that, someone whispered. I made myself hesitate. Hesitation is important. If you accept too quickly, predators smell the trap. So I looked at A06, then at my yellow D27 slip, then at the old B14 ticket that Mrs. Albright had returned to me stamped void, reassigned across the bottom. Celine's eyes lingered on that stamp, but I covered it with my thumb. I don't want to cause trouble, I said. It's no trouble, she replied. We're friends. Pattern interruption. I smiled sadly, as if that word hurt me, and handed her the old ticket instead of the yellow slip. Then take mine. You always said B-row seats were lucky. The corridor changed temperature. Celine froze. She had expected to bargain for my new valid seat, maybe persuade me to take hers while she found a way to manipulate the reassignment. She had not expected me to offer the original number openly, with witnesses, as if I trusted her. She should have refused. A cautious thief would have refused. But Celine Voss was not cautious when applause was near. She saw Nessa watching. She saw the other students watching. She saw a chance to appear selfless while reclaiming control of the seat she had marked for me. Only if you're sure, she said, taking B14 from my hand. Her fingers brushed mine, cold and dry. I wouldn't want anyone to say I pressured you. No one could say that. I answered, and I made sure my voice carried. You're helping me. The words tasted like ash, but they did their work. Celine tucked B14 into her clear folder. I kept the yellow D27 correction slip hidden beneath my palm. Then I went back to the registration booth and told Mrs. Albright that candidate Voss wished to sit in the irregular seat I had vacated. Administrative pride did the rest. There are systems that fail because nobody follows rules, and systems that fail because people follow the wrong rules too obediently. Mrs. Albright should have said no. Instead, faced with a donor's daughter requesting a seat change and a corridor full of students praising her kindness, she opened the red folder, sighed, and filled out an incident adjustment form. Candidate Voss accepts reassigned position B14 at own request, she wrote. Original candidate Vale moved to D27 due to packet irregularity. She stamped it. Celine signed it with a flourish. I signed nothing. That mattered. In my first life, every record pulled me deeper into the fraud because my name, my seat, and my booklet lined up neatly enough for lazy adults to call it proof. In this life, the records split apart before the exam began. My name moved. My old seat was logged as irregular. Celine's signature entered the file voluntarily, smiling all the way down. Hall 2 smelled of varnished desks and anxious breath. Rows of candidates sat under fluorescent lights while proctors walked the aisles with plastic bins for phones, watches, labels, wrappers, tissues, anything that could carry answers. I took D27, near the back wall beneath a clock that ticked too loudly. My desk wobbled on the right side instead of the left. There was no hook-shaped scratch beside the booklet slot. There was no folded paper taped underneath. I ran my fingers along the underside anyway, not because I expected to find anything, but because my body remembered humiliation as a physical place. Across the room, B14 sat in the second block near the window. Celine lowered herself into it like a princess accepting a throne. She looked back once, just once, and gave me the smallest smile. It said thank you for being stupid. I returned a smile of my own. It said thank you for signing. The exam booklets arrived sealed in gray packets with colored bands across the top. Valid sets were green. Makeup sets were blue. Audit sets were red. Voided sets, the kind never meant to be opened, had black diagonal stripes and a punched corner. Most students would not know that. I knew because in the months after my first life disqualification, I spent more hours reading examination regulations than I spent sleeping. I learned the language of people who ruin futures without raising their voices. Irregular packet. Chain of custody breach. Provisional void. Candidate contamination risk. I learned how a booklet becomes invalid before a single answer is written. I learned how committees protect themselves by pretending procedure is morality. And I learned that the paper at B14 had been voided the moment its packet seal tore in transit, meaning any answer written inside it would never count. It could only become evidence. The proctor assigned to row B was a young man with a nervous throat swallow and a stack of packets hugged against his chest. He paused at B14. I saw the moment confusion struck. He looked at the desk label, then at his distribution sheet, then at the packet in his hands. Mrs. Albright appeared beside him, whispered something, and pointed to the incident adjustment form clipped to her board. Celine sat perfectly still, her pen aligned with the desk edge. She believed adults whispering meant she was being accommodated. She believed special treatment had arrived in its usual disguise. The proctor placed a black striped booklet on her desk. She glanced down, frowned for half a heartbeat, then relaxed when Mrs. Albright moved on. Perhaps she did not understand the stripes. Perhaps she understood and thought her family name would bleach them green. Either way, she opened the cover when instructed. The first question was on constitutional reform, and for the first time across 2 lives, I answered it without fear leaking into the margins. My hand shook for the first paragraph, then steadied. I wrote like someone crawling out of a locked room. I wrote about procedure, legitimacy, public trust, checks that cannot rely on reputation. The irony almost made me smile. Around me, pens scratched, pages turned, throats coughed, chairs creaked. At B14, Celine wrote quickly. Too quickly. In my first life, the cheat sheet under that desk had not contained answers to every question. It contained a structure, keywords, citations, enough to make a strong student look brilliant and a frightened student look guilty. Now, under that same desk, I wondered whether the note remained. I did not need it to. The voided booklet was enough. But Celine was greedy, and greed rarely uses only one weapon. 42 minutes into the exam, the second pattern interruption arrived in the form of a cough. Not a normal cough. 3 soft coughs from the side aisle, the signal I remembered from my first life, but had never understood. Celine's pen paused. Her left hand slid toward the underside of the desk. My vision narrowed. There it was. She had planted the note again, or someone had. In my first life, I never touched it until the proctor pulled it out and made the room stare. This time, from D27, I watched Celine touch the edge of her own trap. She did it smoothly, almost beautifully, lifting the paper into her lap beneath the desk line. For one mad second, I wanted to stand up and shout. I wanted the room to know. I wanted to rip the halo from her head with both hands. Instead, I turned to page 3 and kept writing. Revenge is not the loud moment you want. It is the quiet moment you can prove. The exam ended at noon. Booklets were collected row by row. Candidates were ordered to stay seated until all papers were sealed. Celine looked bored, even faintly annoyed, as if greatness had become tedious. When the proctor took her black striped booklet, he placed it into a separate red folder instead of the green collection box. She noticed. Her chin lifted. "Excuse me," she whispered. "Why isn't mine going with the others?" The young proctor swallowed. Mrs. Albright came over so fast, she must have been waiting. "Candidate boss, please remain seated after dismissal." The words moved through the hall like a draft. Students looked sideways without turning their heads. Celine's smile flickered. "Is there a problem?" "Just a verification matter." Verification. The gentlest word institutions use, when a blade is already out. We were dismissed in waves. I packed my pen slowly, capped my water bottle, and waited until my row stood. Nessa grabbed me near the back doors. "Why are they keeping Celine?" she hissed. Her face had lost color. "You traded seats. Did something happen?" "I don't know," I said, which was almost true. I did not know which part had cut her first. The voided paper, the signature, the note, the cough signal, the packet irregularity, the fact that she voluntarily sat where I had been reassigned from. A good trap has layers. If one fails, another holds. Nessa stared at me as if seeing a stranger wearing her cousin's face. Behind us, Hall 2 emptied until only Celine, 3 proctors, Mrs. Albright, and 2 exam board officials remained near B14. The door did not fully close. It stopped on the latch, leaving a narrow gap through which sound escaped. At first, Celine sounded offended. I agreed to help Mara. Everyone saw. She was upset about her reassignment. Mrs. Albright's voice answered, tight and official. Candidate Vale was reassigned due to an invalid packet attached to B14. You requested and signed for that desk after being informed it was irregular. I was not informed it was invalid. The form states irregular. Irregular doesn't mean void. There was a silence so sharp I could feel it through the wall. Then a man's voice said, the set placed at B14 was a voided control paper. It was not eligible for scoring. It should not have been opened except under supervised audit conditions. Celine's tone changed. The sugar drained away. Then why was it given to me? Because you signed acceptance of the desk change after the initial candidate was removed from it. Mara tricked me. There it was. The first honest thing she had said all day, and still not honest enough. The door opened wider when security arrived. By then, a crowd had gathered despite the proctors ordering everyone to move along. Ashevale students loved rules until gossip offered better nutrition. Celine stepped into the corridor with her face pale and furious, the white ribbons still perfect. 2 officials followed, one holding an evidence sleeve. Inside it was a small folded paper covered in microscopic handwriting. My handwriting? No, not this time. In my first life, she had copied my notes to make the cheat sheet look like mine. This time, because I had stopped sharing study material weeks before the exam, the handwriting belonged to someone else. The board would analyze it later, compare it, trace it, turn it into a chain. But at that moment, what mattered was the sight of it in a sealed sleeve beside the booklet she had written. The star pupil had not just sat a voided paper. She had filled it while using a prohibited note. Celine saw me by the stairwell. Her expression cracked open, and for the first time in either life, I saw what lived beneath the ribbon. Not fear, not remorse, but insult. She was insulted that consequence had dared approach her. She crossed the corridor before security could stop her. You did this. Everyone heard. I did not answer immediately. Silence can be more damaging than denial when the other person is desperate to fill it. You asked to take the seat, I said at last. My voice did not shake. You signed the form because you made it look safe. No, I said. I made it look valuable. The words landed. Nessa sucked in a breath. Celine's eyes widened, and in that one exposed second, everyone around us understood more than she meant to reveal. Valuable, not safe. She had not taken B14 to help me. She had taken it because she wanted whatever advantage she thought it contained. The immediate punishment was provisional disqualification pending investigation. That phrase appeared on the notice board before sunset, printed in cold administrative language beneath Celine's candidate number. The academy did not name her at first, but everyone knew. White ribbon, B14, donor family, evidence sleeve. By dinner, the story had mutated 12 times. Some said she had hidden answers in her sleeve. Some said her father had bribed the seating clerk. Some said I had cursed the desk. I let them talk. Rumor is a dirty river. If you jump in to redirect it, you only come out smelling like mud. Instead, I went home, locked my bedroom door, and opened the folder I had prepared before the exam. Inside were copies of every message Celine had sent me over the past month, every request for notes I had not answered, every little reminder that B14 was lucky, every nudge from Nessa telling me to follow Celine's timing, every screenshot of the group chat where the star pupil joked that exam seating could be optimized if you knew who to ask. The next morning, Ashevale tried to save itself. Not Celine. The institution. Schools like Ashevale do not have consciences. They have reputations with budgets attached. The headmaster summoned me to his office at 9:30, which was how I knew the board investigation had already found enough to make adults nervous. His office smelled of leather polish and old trophies. Celine's father sat in one chair, without being introduced. Mrs. Albright sat in another, looking as if she had not slept. The headmaster folded his hands. Mara, yesterday's incident has created misunderstandings. In my first life, those words would have shrunk me. Misunderstanding was what powerful people called harm when they wanted the injured person to apologize for bleeding. This time, I placed my folder on his desk and did not sit. I agree, I said. For example, I misunderstood for years why certain students could access seating information before candidates received official confirmation. Celine's father stood. He was a tall man with a courtroom voice, though. He was not a lawyer, the kind of man who believed volume could purchase truth. Are you accusing my daughter? No, I said. The evidence is. He laughed once, sharp and ugly. You traded seats with her. Incorrect. I was reassigned by the center because my original packet was invalid. Your daughter requested that invalid seat and signed acceptance. The registration supervisor logged it. Several candidates witnessed her offer. I opened the folder and slid out the first page, a printed screenshot of Celine writing, Roby has advantages. Don't panic if there are irregularities. Trust me. The headmaster's mouth tightened. I added the second screenshot. Nessa saying, Celine says if your seat changes, tell her first. She can fix it. Then the third, Celine asking me 2 weeks earlier whether my candidate number ended in 19. It did. The number printed beside B14. Mrs. Albright stared at the documents like they were insects crawling across the desk. The headmaster reached for them, but I kept one hand on the folder. Before anyone asks me to make this quiet, I said, I should mention that I sent copies to the external examination board at 8:12 this morning. I also requested a formal protection note because in my first disciplinary meeting, I was pressured to confess to something I did not do. The room became very still, not because they believed in justice, because external had entered the conversation. Internal problems can be buried in committees, alumni calls, compassionate language, revised minutes. External problems grow teeth. Celine's father looked at me, as if I had slapped him. You're a child. I said. That didn't stop any of you last time. I should not have said last time. It slipped out, a fracture in the mask. The headmaster frowned. Mrs. Albright looked up sharply. For one heartbeat, the room tilted, and I saw myself as they saw me. A final-year girl with tired eyes, speaking as if she had already lived through their worst decisions. Then I corrected myself. Last term, I said calmly, when another complaint was dismissed without review. It was not a perfect save, but adults prefer explanations that keep the world ordinary. They accepted it because reincarnation was not a category on their incident forms. The meeting ended with the headmaster promising cooperation, Celine's father promising legal action, and me promising nothing. Promises had been used against me too often. I took my folder, walked out past the portraits of former Academy Duxes, and did not lower my eyes to any of them. By Wednesday, the examination board's inquiry had widened. The voided paper at B14 was only the visible thread. Once pulled, it loosened a whole seam. Audit logs showed that someone had accessed the seating database after provisional numbers were issued. A staff account belonging to a retired administrator had been used at 2:11 a.m. the night before the exam. That account had viewed 3 candidate records, mine, Celine's, and a boy named Elias Crane who had been moved from B13 to C22 without notification. The board found that the cheat note under B14 contained condensed references matching an unauthorized answer outline circulated in a private tutoring group linked to Celine. They found that Celine had messaged 2 students asking whether the underside placement was secure. They found that her father's assistant had emailed the center 2 weeks earlier requesting front block consideration due to family visibility at the award ceremony. Every little privilege she had ever treated as invisible began leaving fingerprints. The academy turned on her the way crowds always turn when permission arrives. Students who had spent years laughing at Celine's jokes suddenly remembered she had been cruel. Teachers who called her exceptional began saying they had always sensed arrogance. Nessa cried in the bathroom and told everyone she had only followed instructions because she was scared. I believed her and did not forgive her. Both things can be true. On Thursday afternoon, Celine cornered me behind the library, where the shelves blocked the security camera and the dust made the sunlight look old. She was not wearing the ribbon. Without it, She looked smaller, sharper, less like a symbol and more like a person who had mistaken admiration for immunity. "Withdraw your statement," she said. "Tell them you misunderstood the trade." I closed the book I had been reading. "No, you don't understand what this will do to me." I almost smiled. That sentence was the national anthem of people who only discover empathy when consequence has their address. "I understand perfectly." She stepped closer. "My father can ruin you." He tried. "I can say you planned it. You already did. People will believe me. Some will." I stood, and for the first time I realized I was not afraid of her height, her money, her beauty, her practiced trembling voice, or the way rooms bent around her. But the booklet won't. The form won't. The audit logs won't. The note won't. The packet record won't. You built your life on people believing you over evidence. That only works until evidence learns to speak. She slapped me. It was not dramatic. Her palm cracked across my cheek, and the sound bounced once between the shelves. In my first life, violence always surprised me. I had thought cruel people would stop at words if words worked. This time, I turned my face back slowly and looked at the red emergency mirror fixed above the shelf end. It reflected both of us. My cheek marked pink, Celine's hand still raised, and the tiny black dome of the camera she had forgotten behind the periodicals cart, installed after a theft in the library last winter. Her eyes followed mine. The color drained from her mouth. "Mara," she whispered. "Don't." I picked up my book. "You keep giving me things I don't even have to ask for." Friday brought the final notice. It was not posted on the student board. It arrived by email, then by printed memorandum, then by the sudden appearance of 2 external officials in the assembly hall during what was supposed to be a routine results briefing. The headmaster stood at the podium with the expression of a man swallowing glass. Celine sat near the front beside her father, her cheekbones sharp under makeup, her hands folded so tightly the knuckles blanched. I sat near the aisle, D27 still folded in my pocket like a paper charm. The official read the findings without theater. Candidate Celine Voss had knowingly requested an irregular seat after another candidate was reassigned for packet invalidity. Candidate Voss opened and completed a voided control paper. Candidate Voss possessed or accessed unauthorized materials during the exam window. Candidate Voss was disqualified from the current examination cycle, barred from retaking for 3 years, and referred to the Academic Integrity Council for further sanctions. Her answer booklet would not be scored. Her provisional awards were suspended. Her recommendation letters from the Academy were withdrawn pending review. The assembly hall did not erupt at first. It inhaled. 200 students, 30 teachers, a row of parents, all sucking in the same dangerous breath. Then whispers broke like hail. Celine stood too quickly. Her chair scraped the floor. "This is defamation," her father shouted, but the official did not flinch. "Mr. Voss, the board's determination is based on signed records, surveillance footage, physical evidence, and digital access logs." Signed records. That phrase found Celine and held her still. She had signed for B14 because she thought signatures were ceremonial when your family owned enough rooms. She had not understood that paper serves whoever prepares the battlefield. Her father reached for her arm, but she pulled away, looking not at him, not at the officials, not at the teachers suddenly avoiding her eyes, but at me. I expected rage. Instead, she looked betrayed. That almost made me laugh, but the sound would have been too ugly for the room. Of course, she felt betrayed. People like Celine experience boundaries as treason. She had built a world where my silence belonged to her, where my fear belonged to her, where my seat, my notes, my name, my future could be moved around like furniture in her house. The moment I stopped being available, she called it cruelty. The moment I let her choose what she had wanted all along, she called it a trap. Maybe it was. But I had not forced her to take B14. I had not forced her to sign. I had not forced her hand beneath the desk. I had not forced the note into her lap. I had only stepped out of the place she prepared for me and watched her sit down. After the assembly, Nessa found me outside beneath the jacaranda trees, where purple flowers stuck to the wet pavement like bruised stars. She looked exhausted, her eyes swollen, her school tie loose. "I'm sorry," she said. No audience, no Celine, no advantage. Just the words, small and late. In my first life, I had begged for those words from anyone. My aunt, my teachers, my classmates, Nessa. I imagined apology would repair something. It did not. It only showed where the break was. "I know," I said. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. "Can you forgive me?" The old Mara would have rushed to comfort her, because other people's guilt had always felt like my responsibility. The new Mara looked at the sky through the branches and answered honestly, "Not today." That evening, official results were released. My candidate number appeared beside a valid score, not the highest in the academy, not a miraculous perfect mark, not some golden revenge fantasy wrapped in fireworks. It was simply strong.
Real. Meaning.
Good enough for the scholarship interview. Good enough for the national list. Good enough to prove that when nobody stole my paper, framed my seat, or dragged my name through a prepared scandal, I could stand on my own work. I sat alone in my room and stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Then I printed the result, folded it once, and placed it in the drawer beside the yellow D27 correction slip. Proof of survival deserves a place of honor too. A week later, Mrs. Albright resigned from examination duty. The headmaster announced new seating protocols with the grim cheer of a man pretending reform had been his idea. The academy removed Celine's portrait from the honor corridor so quickly that a pale rectangle remained on the wall, cleaner than the paint around it. For a while, students glanced at that empty patch whenever they passed, as if expecting the ghost of the star pupil to step out and explain how unfair consequences had been to her. She did not return. Her father filed one appeal, then withdrew it when the board requested additional device records. That withdrawal told its own story. Some stories become louder when powerful people stop speaking. As for me, I learned to enjoy quiet. Not the old quiet, the frightened kind, the kind that sits with its hands folded and hopes cruelty gets bored. A different quiet, the quiet of locked drawers, copied evidence, official stamps, doors closing behind me by choice. I still carried scars from the first life. Rebirth did not erase them. It only gave me a chance to stop confusing endurance with goodness. When people praised me later for being lucky that Celine exposed herself, I smiled politely and let them keep the word. Luck is what people call preparation when they do not want to admit a girl they underestimated learned the rules better than they did. On the last day of term, I walked past Hall 2 alone. The desks had been stacked for cleaning, their metal legs pointing upward like the ribs of sleeping animals. B14 leaned near the window, stripped of its label. Someone had peeled the number off, but the glue outline remained, a faint rectangular scar on the wood. I stood there for a long moment, remembering the version of me who had sat under that number and believed truth would defend itself if she cried hard enough. I wanted to reach back through time and take her hand. I wanted to tell her that innocence is not protection, that kindness without boundaries is a door left open, that some traps cannot be escaped by proving you are good. Sometimes you survive by moving your seat, saving the receipt, and letting the person who wanted your place discover exactly what they were so eager to claim. Before I left, I took the old B14 label from the trash beside the proctor's desk. It was curled at one corner, sticky with dust, ordinary again. I put it inside my notebook, not as a trophy but as a reminder. A seat number is not a destiny. A title is not a soul. A star pupil is still only a girl if you turn off the spotlight. And a voided paper, placed in the wrong hands, can become the cleanest answer anyone ever gives.